So we were able to just hold her and love her and say our goodbyes then.
Sorry.
It's okay. 3 years to the day.
Oh my God.
That I
The
lost.
same day?
Same day.
What?
One of our traditions was to get together on, we call it Ashley's Angel Day. So I had talked to Jenica on January 2nd. She was planning to come over and she never showed.
This is the Lost Child Podcast, where we delve into the topic of losing a child. These are real stories from real people sharing some of their darkest moments with us and their journey from that fateful experience. If you're grieving, I hope that you find hope and healing in these stories and you can relate to some of them. If you're supporting someone that's grieving, hopefully you can gain insight into what they're thinking and feeling. As a reminder, our guests are sharing some of their most guarded and precious spiritual and emotional experiences with us. Please keep that in mind when making comments on the video or the podcast. We have a guest with us here today, and she's going to share a little bit about her story. Let's dive into the podcast. Well, for starters, thank you, Maralyn, for coming on the podcast and just being here with us in the sunny studio. For starters, we always start out with your children's name, and this is a little bit of a different situation than we've had so far on the podcast, but you've had 2 children that have been lost or that have died. Can you share with us both of their names so that throughout the entire podcast we can use their names?
Absolutely. So I lost Ashlie first. She was 12 years old in 2006. And then we lost Jenica in 2009, and she was 20 years old.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. And how many children do you have total?
I have 4 total, and Ashlie and Jenica were in the middle. So my oldest is Heather, and my youngest is Braun. They're still with us.
Nice.
Can you tell us a little bit about Ashlie and Jenica?
Sure. So Ashlie, I called her an old soul because she came out of the womb happy. I mean, she was smiling at days old. She was just happy to be here. Her whole life was spent loving and just full of life. I used to wake up really early. I've always worked. And so I would wake up and she would be in the living room watching what was on TLC called A Baby Story.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if she didn't know she wasn't ever going to have kids or not, but I didn't know any 4, 5, 6-year-olds that would sit there and watch these kind of shows and cry every single time she watched a birth. But it was amazing to me. She just was that motherly, mother hen type of child. She always took care of her little brother. She just was happy all the time. Jenica was my spunky child. She
And Jenica was your second?
The second one who passed.
Yeah, but she was the second oldest?
Oldest,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
So she was full of life. She loved music and movies, and she would just light up a room when she walked in, just full of life. Super funny, witty all the time, just kept us rolling. And her giggle is what I miss. She just had this particular giggle that she would do that was always her personality.
Is there a memory that you have of Ashlie that you just is kind of your go-to thing that was your favorite thing that happened with her?
Oh gosh, there's way too many to have a favorite. I just remember her. I think one of my favorites is watching her watch that show, actually, and just watch her cry and be so emotional to watch another person give birth. I think that was that just shows you her tender heart.
Yeah.
And where she was.
Mm-hmm. And what about Jenica?
Oh, Jenica, goodness, there's so many, but most of my fondest memories of her are traveling. We're singers in a car. I mean, professional to ourselves.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Yeah.
we love to sing, but she would change the music all the time. So you could be going down the road, listening to one song, singing, the whole family singing, and mid-song, bloop, she'd change it. And it wasn't just in our car. It was everyone's car.
Yeah.
That was just her thing. She thought she was missing out on something better than what we already listened to.
Yeah.
So just those memories, those happy, fun things that we used to do.
Do you have a memory of both of them together with your family that you really enjoyed? Whether it was like a trip you took or something like that?
Well, we were lake people, so we were always out on the boat having fun, things like that. So, those kinds of things always stay with you, just watching us all have fun. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are
things we like to do.
Yeah, those are definitely special times on a boat.
Yep.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think with this one, we'll kind of delineate and go to Ashlie, who was the first one. Can you tell us just a little bit about the story and everything that went on with
Sure.
with Ashlie and where you were at, kind of the things that you found out, and just give us full details of the story with Ashlie?
I sure can. So it was Christmas Day. We stayed home and had kind of Christmas with the family. But Jenica she was 17 at the time. She'd actually gone with a friend to Chicago for Christmas, so she wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
My oldest daughter, Heather, was married and had kids, and they weren't, they were there for the morning. But so Braun and Ashlie and I decided that we would go visit my family in California. So we did like Christmas morning with my family and then flew to California to spend the Christmas holidays with my family because they were all over in California at the time. So we went and spent the whole week over there. And the day that we were supposed to fly back home, I went in to get Ashlie up and get ready for the flight. And she was still breathing, but her eyes had retracted back into her head. And she was just, I couldn't wake her up. She was just there. So I had contacted my dad, and Mom had actually come over to my sister's house where I was staying. And so I had picked her up and carried her downstairs and asked my dad to give her a blessing. And he did, and he never said anything about her healing or anything. He said to bless her that the doctors would know what was wrong. And that's pretty much what the blessing was. And almost as soon as he said amen, she quit breathing.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to do CPR. We ran and got a neighbor, did CPR, and took her to a local hospital. And they really couldn't do much for her. That was such a small little hospital that they flew her to a children's hospital in Fresno. And she had coded 4 or 5 times.
Did you get to be in the helicopter with her?
No, I did not. She was too sick and there was too much going on. So I had a 2.5 hour drive.
Oh my gosh.
To get to the hospital. When I did get there, of course, it's just myself and my mom. My husband had stayed home to work.
Yeah.
So I was in the hospital by myself. As soon as we walked through the door, the doctors kind of came to me and said, there's really not much we can do. We have her on life support, but what we found is a tumor in the back of her head.
Oh, wow.
That had covered the right ventricle, and so she was getting no oxygen. It was inoperable. There's really nothing they could do. I asked them if they would please leave her on life support because I wanted my husband to be there.
Yeah.
So I had family actually call him and tell him he needed to get to where we were, and I didn't really explain anything to him. I just thought it was going to be, this is a 9-hour drive, 12-hour drive, something like that, to where, because he was here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So my family all gathered at the hospital with me. So I had a lot of support there, but I needed Robert to be with me.
Yeah.
So he got in the car and he actually, I believe, brought Jenica. She had gotten back from Chicago and she drove with him to the hospital. So they got there in the middle of the night. The doctor kind of did the same spiel when he got there and basically told us.
He didn't know yet.
He didn't know.
And so he got there in this.
Yeah. We had to tell him.
Your daughter's pretty much dead, going to be dying.
She was brain dead. Yeah. She was already brain dead. Hooked up to every monitor known to man. And we took her in, let him see her. And then we together made the decision that was no way to live. Mm-hmm. And plus they told us if she had coded one more time, because she kept coding. Oh her body was just shutting down. It just, even with the life support, it wasn't sustaining. So we just decided to take her off.
And from a non-medical person, since we have a medical person here, what does it mean to code? Just so everybody else knows. So she's a nurse. So
their heart stops beating.
Yeah.
And they quit breathing. Yeah.
So she didn't have any symptoms?
The night before, she complained of a headache.
That's it?
12-year-old. That was the only sign or symptom she had. Was I had a headache and I gave her aspirin.
Yeah.
Before she went to bed, and then she woke up once in the night and said, "Mom, my head hurts." And so, I gave her more aspirin. What else would you do?
Yeah, you would have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, of course.
And so then you guys were in the hospital in Fresno, and you made the decision, let's take her off of life support.
Yeah. And I mean, as soon as they turned the machine off, there was no breath. There was nothing. So we were able to just hold her and love her and say our goodbyes then.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's really hard to do.
Hospitals can be very special places where miracles happen.
Absolutely.
They can also be some of the worst places.
Yeah. But we knew she wouldn't have wanted to stay in that state.
Of course.
And that's not, I mean, there was zero chance of her recovery. Zero. So I'm just happy that, you know, my prayers were answered that he got to be there
Yeah.
before they actually, you know, took her away and took her to the morgue and all that.
Yeah, because she could have kept coding.
Yeah, and they said they weren't going to continue. I mean, she was so weak that they weren't going to continue to try to revive her if she coded again. So we were very lucky from the time that I arrived until he arrived, which was 9 to 12 hours. She did never code again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So then what happened from there of planning the funeral and getting her back to Arizona or doing it in California? How did all of that pan out? Because you had so much emotional turmoil going on, but then there was a ton of logistic stuff that's different than someone might have, because you guys were on essentially a vacation or a trip seeing your family in California.
So we decided, I have an older sister that had lost a son a few years before.
Oh, wow.
And so we decided, Ashlie, absolutely, we were from California, obviously, and she loved California. My sister had bought 2 plots when they buried their son. They bought a plot next to his thinking that they would be buried next to him.
Yeah.
Well, when this happened, she and her husband gave us the plot. So
they could be by each other.
That's
special.
Super special. So she's planted. She's buried right next to Brandon.
Yeah. And how old was Brandon when he
Brandon
died?
was 16, and he was in a car accident probably 5 or 6 years prior to Ashlie.
Oh, wow.
So she already had the plot. She had a bench that she'd put out by his grave, and it's in this beautiful little town called Valley Home up in the Central Valley of California, and it's just got pastures and things around it. It's just serene and beautiful. So we felt really good about staying there. That's where she died, and that's where I think she wanted to be.
Yeah.
So we planned the funeral there and buried her there. About a week after we returned to Arizona, we had a memorial service here for our friends, and a lot of the school, I mean, almost the whole entire school came over.
Yeah.
Because she was in 6th grade and she left for winter break and never came back. So we needed to close that for those kids too.
Yeah.
Her and her friends. So we decided to do a second one. It wasn't quite as big, but it was needed and special. It was hard to do.
Yeah.
Doing one funeral was hard. Doing 2 is really, really hard.
Yeah, we can relate a little bit on the school stuff. Sonny died the day after Meet Your Teacher night.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she was so excited.
Yeah.
So take us a little bit from that point of what happened right there after Ashlie died, of kind of the emotional things with your family and how it kind of played out, just everything.
Well, I mean, of course, as you probably know, you're pretty numb at first. And for me, myself, I felt like I had to be strong for those around me. Personally, I think some of my friends and some congregation members and things like that from our church, they were so distraught. And I felt like sometimes I had to be the strong one where
Interesting.
It was almost like a role reversal. I was emotional and things at home, but out in public, I was very okay.
Yeah.
At least I put on that hat.
Yeah.
It wasn't true, but we all put on masks and hats and things to get through our days. So
Here's also a reminder to subscribe and follow this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. Now, back to the podcast. How long do you think the numb feeling
for me,
transpired for?
for a while, but I think you finally have to come to a point where you have to live and get through some of those emotions. And I think that's the hardest part, is letting yourself feel and be and do all that you have to get through it.
What did your kids think about all of it?
Of course, my older kids understood a lot more than my younger son. Braun was only 9.
Okay.
And so, yeah, he understood his sister wasn't there, but he didn't understand. And it didn't affect him as deeply as it did some of the other kids.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, my 2 older girls turned to drugs and some other things that weren't healthy.
Oh, wow.
So we had to deal with some of that as well. And Braun didn't really get affected until he hit high school. And then because we'd lost a second one, it kind of all came down for him.
For everybody else that's listening and watching, the pain, you can't even explain the pain
No.
from a parent standpoint. And then from a parent standpoint, you can see the hurt in your other kids,
You can.
and you can't do anything to alleviate that.
No. Lots of hugs, lots of talks. I think some of the best things we did was keep an open dialogue. If they needed to talk about anything, I mean, there's no bars, no limits.
Yeah, there's no
you talk-
taboo subjects.
Nope. Whatever's on your mind, we're going to talk about it and get it out.
You said you are fairly religious. So when it happened, did you have any animosity towards God or anything in that direction, or even like I don't want to read my scriptures, I don't want to go to church, or anything to that effect?
Actually, I was just the opposite. I kind of gravitated to that because that was the only thing that gave me peace. So reading my scriptures and attending my meetings, and in our religion, we go to the temple, and those were some of the places that I was able to find peace, where I didn't really find it out in the world. I had joined some groups for parents that had lost children, and they were so sad. And
What made them sad?
no hope.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had that
really?
light and some hope and faith, where I feel like some of them were so caught up in never being able to see that child again. Never. I mean, they were just gone. And so there's no explaining my own testimony and hope of God and how he heals and how he protects and how he helps us overcome some of these feelings
Yeah.
of
So-
despair.
Yeah. So you did those group kind of like therapy kind of things, but they weren't very helpful to you because there was
No,
just
I couldn't even
so
stand going to
depressing.
them, or listening, whichever, because some of them were online and some of them were in person. And I eventually just thought, that's not the route that I can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there.
Yeah.
So
you have to move forward.
You have to move, and you have to let God help you.
Is there other things you did besides church related to help you cope?
yeah.
And what,
Well, yeah,
what
what
were
were some
those?
of those
Whether
things?
therapies or medications?
Well,
or,
I didn't use any medication. That's just not part of who I am. I'm very natural, and so that wasn't an option. I did have my doctor offer, I can give you this, I can give you that, and it just wasn't an option for me. I wasn't depressed. I was sad.
yeah.
And to me, there's a huge difference.
Okay.
And that's just me. I mean, other people, I don't judge anyone for whatever they're feeling and whatever they need to help them get through.
Yeah.
I want people to do whatever it takes. That wasn't an option for me. And the therapy that I used was actually after Jenica that really helped.
Okay. And so then from a timeline standpoint, did you get to a place where you were kind of okay with the fact that Ashlie had died?
Yeah.
So you were I'm kind of not over. I don't like to use the term over, but you were in a better place.
In a better place. You learn
Right?
to cope and deal. And yes.
And so you lost Ashlie, and then based off the math, I think it was
3 years.
2 years, 3 years
It was
after.
3 years
Okay.
to the day.
Oh my
that
God.
I
The
lost.
same day?
Same day.
What?
So one of our traditions was to get together on, we call it Ashley's Angel Day. We always got together. We'd go take balloons to the lake or write messages. I mean, there was just so many different little things that we did. But we would always meet on that January 3rd and go do something. So I had talked to Jenica on January 2nd. She was planning to come over. We had a dinner planned. We had pizza party, the whole thing. And she never showed. And that's not Jenica. She didn't live with us. She was 20, so she lived out on her own. And so I knew something was wrong, tried to call her, but we didn't get any answer. And so then a couple days later, and it wasn't unusual not to talk to her for a couple days, but she checked in all the time, or she was shopping in my pantry,
Yeah.
as young adults do.
As a
Young
20-year-old
adult, yeah,
does.
exactly.
no,
You know, kids that age, they come and shop in mom's pantry all the time. So it wasn't unusual for her it was unusual for her not to come over. And
Yeah.
when she didn't show up on Ashley's Angel Day, we kind of went, that's really odd. A few days later, her friends started calling me, have you seen Jenica? Have you seen Jenica? And I'm like, no. Have you? And they were like, no, we can't get her to answer her phone. We can't find her. So after a few days, we finally, I'd called everyone and anyone.
And this is 2009 time
This is
frame.
2009.
So it wasn't like smartphone era where you
No.
could be like, hey, find my friends. Where's her
Nothing.
phone pinging or anything? This is
Nope.
No idea.
flip
Yeah.
phone, Nokia flip phones or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the technology wasn't there. We filed a missing persons report, and they basically said she's over 20 or over 18. She can be gone if she wants to. And so they didn't really take it serious.
What? Even though like all of her friends and stuff said that they
Yep.
had no idea where she was.
Exactly. So that was really heartbreaking that we didn't get the assistance. Yeah, they did a little investigation. They called a few people and this and that and the other, but there wasn't really much assistance as far as police.
Yeah.
So talking with friends, we found out who she was with the night that she went missing, or the night that she had
Last had contact with
had
somebody.
contact with somebody. We found out who she is with, and we gave that information to the police. And I actually went out and found where he had been staying at a campsite and told the police. And I had to go hunt down a sheriff that would go out there and actually like interview the guy, like talk to him, see what's going on. And he told me, because we had already started an investigation with a different police department, that we needed them to follow up. So he went out and interviewed the guy, and he said, you need to get your detective.
They need to come and check out this
They need
guy.
to check this guy out. Well, they never did.
What?
No. So it just got missed. Like everything got missed. So we had them, I asked them to ping her phone records, and it took them 10 months before they did that. And the phone at the time, the carrier, they only kept records for like 6 months, and then they dump them. So because they'd waited so long
They
to
didn't
try to
even
ping
have
it,
that.
Yeah.
there was no record to get of where it last pinged.
That is very frustrating.
It was very, very, very frustrating. So, yeah, we did a lot.
And all this time, like did there become a time where you're still having the hope of maybe she's somewhere?
Yeah, you always have that hope, but I think God and he has some tender mercies. I kind of knew there was some foul play going on.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have that gut feeling.
Yeah.
And, but there's always a little glimmer of hope. I mean, like our family went out, we kind of figured because of where he had been, we were searching for
All
body
over there, yeah.
all over the areas where he was. And, of course we did that for years. Anytime I'm my daughter and I, my oldest daughter and I, anytime we had extra time, we were out there looking. I can't tell you how many dead dogs I've unburied because you can see a shallow grave and things like that. So it was very, very, very hard. And that went on. Her remains were not found for 5.5 years.
5.5 years.
5.5 years.
They ended up finding him though?
They did. Her remains were found up near Apache Lake. So I knew she was by water. I just wasn't in the right area.
And is this the same area that guy was camping?
He was
at or
camping
anything?
closer to like the Salt River area
Okay.
in that realm. So I thought maybe she'd be in that area.
And did they close the investigation and not
No,
open
it's
it anything more? Is there
It's an open
still-
homicide now because of her remains.
And was there? It had been 5 years. Was there any way for them to tell any foul play or anything
Yeah,
like
it was
that?
foul play. I can't go into a whole lot of details because
it's an open
still
investigation.
an open homicide.
Wow.
But yeah, it was horrific. So my
What was it worse to find out that she was gone, or worse to find out that it was horrific? In using your terms,
it was worse to find out how.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because you don't want to have to know that your daughter
I mean, even though you had that gut feeling that they were gone, the reality of it is difficult.
so within that 5 years that transpired, take us through some of the emotional toll that it took on you, because you were already on a healing journey from losing Ashlie,
Right.
and then almost double punched with Jenica. Where did you go emotionally from there and spiritually?
Well, when you have a missing child, you exercise and go to any length to find that child.
Yeah.
So we had gone to psychics. We used every resource known to man. And I put out at this time, Facebook started getting popular. So we were putting out missing person pages. I had flyers made up. I gave them to truckers. I would have them put them at every stop they would go to. I mean, we had a network as big as it could be back then, doing anything and everything we could. The police department at one point, probably a couple years in, did a silent witness type of thing where they offered a reward. They get a lot of hits, but nothing that really, made sense.
Yeah.
But after her remains were found, they did it a couple more times, but really nothing. They brought the guy finally in after her remains were found, but there's not enough evidence on the remains to charge anyone with anything right as of right now. And the DNA was very, very minimal.
Admit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the DNA stuff available, like there was a fingerprint, but it was smudged. And so it wasn't an accurate one. There was one hair, but no follicle. So at the time they didn't have the technology to trace it back to anyone.
Maybe this is a dumb question. Were they able to analyze the remains enough that they could date when the actual death happened? Is that possible that they can do
not
that?
an exact, but of course it was
a general time frame.
right around when we said she went missing.
Last contact, with somebody that she knew.
Okay.
So it was within days, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we just consider it on that day. It's just easier. You have one day,
And then what did you do with the remains? Since it's an open
So-
investigation, is that still part of evidence, or were you
No,
able to kind of have?
They did all of their testing and everything, so they have that. They were able to give us the remains, and we just had them cremated, and
Okay.
then we laid her in Ashley's gravesite.
Wow.
So
Oh, okay.
her box of remains is just on top of Ashley's casket. We put 2 separate headstones there, so they're in the same space.
Wow.
Oh, that's nice that they're together.
Yeah. So that was pretty amazing that we were able to do that as well.
And then did you hold a funeral for
For Jenica,
Jenica or a memorial or anything?
we did a memorial just at the gravesite.
Yeah.
It had been so long, and it was really just very personal to us. We just
Yeah.
wanted to honor her and share with those that were the closest.
Mm-hmm.
And she did have a couple friends that came out, and a few of her other friends here in Arizona. We did a little memorial, and they wanted to go put a cross out where she was found, and all sorts of things like that. So of course I honored whatever anybody wanted to do, because all of us were on a healing journey,
Yeah.
at that point. Some of the things that I did before she was found was rapid eye therapy, and I don't know if you guys have heard about this
the
yet.
EMDR.
And I found that to be the best for myself in releasing some of those deep, dark emotions that needed to be released. And then just turning to God. That's the only thing I can say that's really helped me, is letting him. He's always there for us. We have to invite him in, though.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll jump back to the podcast in just a second. Thank you for listening. Just wanted to take the time to let you know we started a Patreon account for the Lost Child podcast. If you want to support us financially to help share these stories with the world, there's a link in the video description or podcast description that you can go and find our Patreon account. For as little as $10 a month, you can help support the Lost Child podcast. So please help support the podcast and help support us by visiting the link in that video description. Now, back to the podcast. Do you think the sadness was even more with Jenica because it was another thing on top of already losing Ashlie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at that point, you're kind of devastated, even more than you ever thought you could be with the first.
Yeah.
It's just compounded.
I'm so sorry. One thing that many psychologists talk about is the grief cycle, and that is different stages of grief. And I've explained it many times, but I'll explain it again. That doesn't necessarily mean it's linear stages and you
Right.
just go through them once and you're done. It's more of a cycle that you can ping through any of those cycles. Some of them would be things like anger, depression,
Denial,
bargaining, and acceptance. Those are kind of the 5 stages. Did you see any of those stages kind of appear in any of your emotions or in any of the actions that you took following the death of either Ashlie or Jenica?
Yeah, I think acceptance came pretty quickly with Ashlie. I mean, we were there. We knew there was nothing we could do. Yes, it's sad and it's horrible, but I didn't blame God. I didn't, it just happened.
Yeah.
And so I think
Happened quickly too.
it did. It
Yeah.
was just like dancing one night and not there the next, that's how quick it was. And with Jenica, it was so different that I think we went through those cycles many times, the bargaining.
And the bargaining would be something like, what if I would have done X? Would I have changed the outcome?
Right. You start thinking, well, if I would have had her over earlier, or if we
If I would have gone and picked her up.
yes,
if,
anything like
yeah.
that. Of course, you have all these guilty feelings that aren't real.
And they're natural.
They're natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just have to work through those. And those phases come and go. Even though it's been years and years now, I still have sad days. I still have, but I've gotten to a point where I can let myself have that sad moment, that cry, whatever I need, and then move on. I've gotten to that point. And it takes a long time. That does not come quickly.
One thing that I thought was helpful on one of the other people that we interviewed, she told herself that if she has a sad day or has a bad day, she gives herself a time limit on it of like, I can be in this state today, but in the morning, I have to move on to something different.
Exactly.
And she gives herself this time limit of it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be whatever the emotion is, but she also puts a time limit on it. And I had never thought of it that way when she suggested that. I thought that that was a super helpful thing that say, you know what? I'm just going to be in this moment right now.
Right.
It's okay. But come morning, I have to choose something different.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I did that to myself, not so much with the time limit, but just letting myself have those emotions and then moving on. You just can't stay there. Like I said earlier, it's not a place you want to dwell. It's a place that you need to go through, you need to let those emotions out, but it's not where I want to be and it's not who I am. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I had to learn is that I am not the sad person. That's not me. My personality is bubbly and alive and joyful. And so I don't want to be labeled as the sad old lady who's lost 2 kids.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be. I want people to know me for who I am, you know? And I think that was one of the hardest things to learn and to come through is allowing yourself to be happy again, allowing yourself to find joy.
Did you ever feel guilty when you
Yes.
had a happy day?
Yes, that happened. And so it's learning to get
How
through
did you
that.
figure out how to get through that? What helped you that you could almost relinquish that guilt for experiencing joy again and experiencing happiness?
For me personally, I had to box up a whole lot of things, put them in a literal box and set them at the feet of my Savior and say, I can't do this. I cannot go through this. I can't hold on to these emotions, these things. It's not what I want. You take them. And so it was very, very literal for me to put those in a box and give them away. Not that I don't visit them once in a while, but they're not mine. They're his. It's not something I want to carry around for my whole life.
So you actually have a box. You wrote down notes or something, cards.
No, metaphorical box.
Okay.
But again, a box.
Yeah.
And in my own way, I have laid that at his feet and said, I can't do it. It's yours. Mm-hmm. He tells us we can do this. I have faith that he's going to do it for me. That's what I had to do.
And I think I would also add, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's also a process.
It is.
Right? It's not necessarily I showed up on a Wednesday, I put this all in here you go,
Nope.
take it, and then it was gone. It's been a process
Absolutely.
for you to
Some days I add,
remove yourself from those.
some days I have to add to it.
Yeah.
You know, some days it has to be okay to put those things away and give them to somebody else. And that somebody is my Savior.
One thing I have to ask about Jenica's situation is from a closure standpoint, would you feel as though you have closure right now? Or if from a court standpoint, they're able to prosecute somebody and like you actually find out everything there, would you feel like you have closure then? Or do you feel like you have closure now?
I have closure because my prayers were answered.
Yeah.
I asked to get my daughter back.
Yeah.
That was the one and only thing that I wanted. No matter what had happened to her, I wanted her back. Took 5.5 years to get her,
Yeah.
but that was what I needed.
Okay.
And so, yes, do I want something to happen legally? I would love it if it did, but I can't worry about it. I can't let that be one of those things that drags me down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to give that away and put that in that box and say, this is up to you. That's for him to do, not me, because I can't do anything. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's on him. He's going to take care of it in the end anyway.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of that cycle of forgiveness that we have to go through. Also, forgiving ourselves, but forgiving that other person is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So that is a process. that one day I can be okay and the next I might not be. And so forgiveness to me isn't a one and done. It's a continual thing.
Yeah.
Even with myself. Sometimes I have to give myself a little grace too. You know?
I agree with that. There was a talk I remember hearing where somebody was talking about the Holocaust, and they were talking about a Holocaust survivor that was giving a talk, and they said that we need to forgive people, and how they've been in a horrible situation and they need to just forgive people. But at the end of the talk, there was actually one of the prison guards that was in the congregation, came up to the person and said, "Do you forgive me?" To the person that had just given the talk, who was the Holocaust survivor. And in the talk, from my memory, said something to the effect that they really didn't want to forgive that person, and they said a little prayer, essentially like, "Help me forgive this person." I just gave this whole talk, this whole inspirational message about how forgiveness is so important. And so they said a little prayer, and they were able to just bring their hand up. That was all that they could do.
Yeah.
To forgive that person. Yeah.
Yep. I totally understand that. There's days where I'm okay. And like I said, there's days that you're not, that you've got anger and you've got some of those feelings that, you know, that unfairness. How could you do this kind of feelings? And it's hard. It's hard to know that there's a person out there, you know, in my world, I think they're living this great life. I know they're not, because they can't.
Yeah.
There's no way that you can commit things like that and be okay with your own self.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have to remember that as well. That yes, they may be free, they're not imprisoned, but they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
With what they've done.
And is it helpful to have people say something like, "Well, Christ suffered for all of this to make it all right"? Is that helpful at this point, or is that still not helpful?
Oh, no,
and has it?
It's very helpful for me.
Okay. And
Oh,
has
yeah.
it always been helpful?
Yes.
Because there's times that where I would think in certain situations, even in this situation, that right after, and someone comes to you and says, "It's okay, Christ suffered, everything's going to be okay," that you would almost be like, "Leave me alone." No, it's not okay. Because right now, we just found her bones next to
Right.
this lake. This is awful.
Right. Yeah, it's process.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is. It's working through your own emotions and your own situation and letting God refine you into what he needs and wants. And that's where I think the growth comes in, is allowing him to heal your heart and continue to make you who he wants you to be. Be that light to somebody else. That's what my whole goal is now, is that I can give hope to someone else who's going through this horrific journey, who has to suffer pains like this, letting them know they don't have to do it on their own, that there's tons of us out here that are willing to share and hope and help them.
Do you still feel that sense of responsibility to almost help other people, but even those that aren't necessarily going through this, but someone that would look to you
Absolutely.
and say, "Look at how you're actually dealing," I don't like that word, but dealing with these tragedies that have happened in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility or a sense of ownership of that?
I do. I feel like that's part of what I'm here for, is to help others. And because I've gone through these things, I can help somebody else. Maybe theirs is a little different, and grief is different. It may not just be the loss of a child. It can be grief for anything, you know,
Oh, yeah.
whatever grief that is. I feel like we can be helpful, and our stories can be helpful, and our faith can be helpful.
How did your husband deal with everything, and did it affect your relationship when you lost Ashlie and then also when you lost Jenica?
Yeah. I think because my sister had gone through this prior, we watched her and her husband split.
Yeah.
And that was really hard to watch. And so we kind of decided at the very, very beginning, we needed to be each other's rock. We needed to stay together, and we needed to not let these unfortunate events pull us apart.
And
Now
did you have a conversation like that after Ashlie died?
We did.
Where you were kind of like, hey, we need to do this?
We need to be on the same page. We don't have to grieve the same way. We
Yeah.
don't have to grieve or do things the same way, but you and I need to be here together for each other.
Yeah.
We need to allow each other to do whatever it is that we need to do to heal.
And did you revisit that when Jenica died then?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I think it's made us stronger.
And are you still married today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. For us, it had always been, no table or no seats empty at the table. That's kind of our family thing,
Yeah.
all the seats need to be filled. And now it's like my table has shifted. It's no longer here. I mean, there is a table here, but I don't want to look at just those empty seats. What I want to know is they're okay. They're doing fine. And there's a table there waiting for me. And how am I going to live my life here so I can be at their table?
Have you had any peace come into your mind that they are okay?
They're fine.
That's one thing I think across the board for all parents is, and even people that lose anyone, they want to know that they're okay.
I know they're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had some really incredible experiences that have given me that assurance that they are perfectly fine and they're doing good things.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're able to have that.
We've had some people that one spouse has had some definite spiritual experiences and the other spouse has had really no spiritual experiences, but has still come to acceptance and know that they're okay. Has your husband also had some level of experiences to let him know that they're okay?
I think he's in a good place too.
Yeah.
His experience are definitely different than mine. We're, at different levels of learning and spirituality all throughout your life. But I think he's at that acceptance place.
Okay. And then how has the death of both Ashlie and Jenica, well, I guess I want to ask a different question first. How did the death of Ashlie impact your relationship with Jenica in those 3 years that she was still alive?
Well, they were rough. She was a senior in high school. Like I said, she had turned to some drugs and some other things. And so we went through some hard times.
Yeah.
Just trying to help her and deal with her at the loss of her sister.
Yeah.
That was really, really hard.
Yeah.
So it was kind of tumultuous for a bit, but we were still okay.
Yeah. It still sounded like she definitely would check in with you and there was still a relationship that was there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so then the other question to kind of follow and piggyback off of that is how did the relationship adjust or shift with some of your other children based off of the death of Ashlie and the death of Jenica?
Well, I know for my older daughter, Heather, and I, we have just bonded and been so close. We're each other's rock. We're best friends.
Does she have any kids currently?
Yeah, she has 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. And we've had a wonderful relationship. She was going through a divorce when Ashlie died, but she is remarried and he's helped raise those kids and they're just a great family.
Wow.
Great family. And then Braun, he's my younger son. He and I have always been super, super close.
Yeah.
So we just have a great family.
And as a parent, did it change your parenting style at all when Ashlie died and then subsequently when Jenica died?
Yeah. Your perspective on everything changes
Yeah.
because little things don't matter anymore. They just don't.
Agree.
You have to look at the big picture. At least for myself, that's where I needed to go. And sometimes it's not worth it to make a big deal out of things that just don't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't matter.
I totally get that.
That's the one thing I wish I could take out of my brain or take out of all of our brains and shove on every parent.
Right?
Because there's things that you think are so big And when you go through something like this, you find out
Not a big deal.
it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't even matter. You know, I watch parents get mad at their kids in the store, and I'm like, oh, if you only knew,
Yeah.
just hug them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just be grateful they're in your life right now. I think that's one of the hardest things that we as surviving parents have to go through is watch other people maybe not be so kind.
Yeah. Or sometimes complain about
Or
your
complain.
kids. And I get it. Everybody, all kids are frustrating. And even I've complained about my own kids, and I've probably still complained about my kids since Sonny's death. And it's only been 6 months, right? So I've reverted back a little bit. However, it's so precious.
It is.
And time is so limited. We only had 6 years. You only had 12 with Ashlie. You only had 20 with Jenica. So I hope that that's one thing that people can take from this is a shift in their perspective from a parenting standpoint.
I hope so. I mean, you hate to have to rely on somebody who's gone through things like this to make you shift, but maybe that's what they need
Yeah.
is to see, you know, it's precious. They are precious.
And so it's been 2006. So it's been
18 years.
18 years
Oh, wow.
since Ashlie and 15-ish years since Jenica. Even within the last 18, 15 years, are there still really hard days where grief just kind of gets you?
Yeah, they sneak up on you. And sometimes you don't know when they're going to happen. Sometimes it can be a song on the radio or a movie that plays. It can be anything. Their birthdays, Christmas. Christmas was the last holiday I had with both of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just those kinds of things sometimes trigger some emotions and things. But you learn to cope a little bit differently. For me, the first year of losing at least Ashlie, it was all those firsts that you have to get through and you kind of muddle your way through. For me, it got harder the second and third year.
Yeah.
It just was because you knew they were coming. You know, the first year you're just muddling through trying to figure this new life out without them. But the second and third, it hurt.
Did you also feel a little bit more abandoned on the second and third? And I say that because typically right when something like this happens, like you were in California, you had all your family, then you did a funeral memorial back here for Ashlie. You probably would have had a church family or community around you that would have kind of rallied and been there and helped with meals and just kind of are there for you. But then 2 years removed from it and everyone else just goes on with their life and they don't really think of you in those situations. So did you feel somewhat abandoned? I guess is an okay term to use.
I think your family and your really close friends are those that remember. I still have friends that 18 years later will say, oh my gosh, it was Ashley's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ashlie. You know, just things like that. Are you doing okay? What'd you do today? Those kinds of things. So I think we do have some of those special friends and family. And I love it when they remember because to me, I'm always going to remember. But for them to remember is so incredibly special to me. Like they remembered, you know, because life goes on and they don't have to.
True. They don't.
So I really love those close relationships and cherish those friendships. You know, the ones that truly care about us.
Did it shift any friendships in a negative way that they couldn't handle some of the things that you were going through? Or did it only strengthen the relationships you already had from a friendship standpoint?
From a friendship standpoint, I think most of my friends are still, you know, we still continue to be friends. They've changed just because I've changed a little bit. And not that they're good or bad, but maybe I don't hang out with some of them as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't like myself to be in negative spaces anymore. I don't want those type of relationships. I only want ones that are going to be positive and moving me in the direction I want to go.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dwell on somebody's gossip and little piddly things that
Don't matter.
don't matter.
Yeah.
And so, I some of those
And
relationships
can almost
change.
be kind of cancerous too.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. It's really hard to listen to somebody complain when it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of those hard firsts, we're about ready to go through a hard first. Sonny's birthday's next week.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. Those are hard firsts. So you let yourself and your family, you celebrate however you need to, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
We cherish those days now because we're able to write down the memories and say what we're grateful for and say the things that we miss about them. You know, it's hard that first year. Oh my gosh. Just muddling through. It's difficult.
one last question would be, is there anything that has helped you in the last 18 years that you wish you would have adopted sooner?
Oh gosh. I guess I wish that I would have known about some of the therapies like the rapid eye sooner,
Yeah.
just because it wouldn't have been so hard for those first 3 or 4 years
Yeah.
after losing Ashlie and then Jenica. I didn't hear about that until about 10, 11 months after Jenica had gone missing is when I was introduced to that. And what a difference for me personally was, that was definitely helpful.
Was it instantaneous? Oh,
Earlier, you said you and your husband like tried everything possible that you could find. Can you elaborate on what other things you guys tried? Like for therapies or...
Well, therapy,
and trying to connect with Jenica is kind of when you brought that up. You were trying to see.
we're just trying to find her. I mean, when you're not getting help from the police and things like that, you turn to anything and everything that you can. And actually, we were given really good information on a few. And then you have people that don't mean well coming out of the woodwork when you post it up publicly. And so I think one of the gifts that I relish is being able to discern who was out for our good and who wasn't. And so relying only on the information that felt right,
Yeah.
you know? So I think God has given people some gifts, and if they're using it for good, they can really be helpful. And then there's other people that are not in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So we never really went to like family counseling or did the mainstream type of counseling. It just wasn't, it didn't feel like that's where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
You didn't feel like you and your husband ever needed to do therapy together?
No. Mm-mm. It doesn't mean that it's not right. It just didn't work for us. I mean, it wasn't something that...
I always think there's so many different tools out there because there's so many different types of people. And so not every type of tool is going to be for every person.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we ask this question, is so then people can understand what tools other people have used.
Because maybe they haven't heard of that specific tool before.
Like
Right.
the EMDR stuff. Right. And on that level, how long did it take to have that therapy actually help you? Was it a couple sessions? Was it like 10 sessions? Or
I don't remember the exact number. I did sessions probably consistently, maybe 3 or 4. You know, they said they're going to last an hour and they would last 3.
Oh, wow.
You know, they were hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know much about what goes on there, but they're really emotionally
Can
hard.
you tell us a little bit about what happens?
Well, it's just a way that looking at their little wand, it just triggers your eyes to get you into a deeper space into your head, and it allows you to bring up memories and feelings, just different emotions and things that are going on, and helps you to release them so that they're not stuck down in those deep places.
Yeah.
And for me, that was very helpful. My husband never wanted to do it, and that was fine.
Yeah.
He needed to do what he needed to do. I needed to do what I did. And so between those therapies and really learning how to pray and meditate are what I turn to. Prayer is obviously where I'm asking God for things that I need, and meditation is where I have the time to listen. And so that has become an essential part of my life. Those two things.
Well, earlier you said you had met Melanie at the gym. So do you exercise a lot
I do.
too?
Well, I used to a whole lot. Yes.
Yeah.
That's always been one of my releases is those endorphins are fantastic. And
Did your exercise increase following the death of either Ashlie or Jenica? Did you?
I've always been athletic and
Okay.
doing things like that, but I really got into CrossFit kind of right before Jenica was found, actually.
Okay.
It was just something I got into.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's similar to everyone else that we've interviewed is exercise and how important that is for your brain
Oh, yeah.
after losing. I mean, for everyone, honestly,
Right.
exercise is good for everybody, but it really is a good release.
It is. You know, it's time that you don't have to think about what's going on in your life and lifting something heavy and throwing it back down and maybe pretending that somebody's head might be down there might help.
Exactly. Get some anger out.
Get some
too.
anger out. I mean,
My-
there was a lot of things that it really helped. And people have, people in the gym don't know.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mine's almost different though, because I use some of my exercise and some of my stuff that I do physically of my time to actually think and process through some of my thoughts. So it's
Yeah.
completely different.
Completely.
But I use it in that manner, and it's a healthy thing for me, just like it was a healthy thing and still is a healthy thing for
Yeah.
you to continue to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to have to think about anything other than I'm lifting this weight right here.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to have some kind of a release. So exercise is great.
Definitely.
Well, with that, honestly, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast, being willing to share your story. I understand that it's a heavy topic. And not only did it happen to you one time, it's happened multiple times. And there's still some open-endedness to Jenica's death. And so I just appreciate your willingness to come on and share with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think you guys are doing a wonderful thing helping others.
Thank you.
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Lost Child podcast. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. And remember, shine bright, and we'll see you in the next episode.